Good morning, everybody. Betting for breakfast presented by Heat Ratio Sports Network. I'm Mark Drumheller. I'm here with Dave Gleckner and special guest today, Matt Joseph. You know him by mid-major. Matt, nobody better to break down the FCS Championship game today. Plus, we're going to talk about some NBA futures a little bit later in the show. But Matt, first off, I want to say thank you for joining us. And also, I appreciate you and Rob doing the content weekly on the FCS this year. It's been a real crazy season. I love football, so I love football in the spring. I'll take it anytime I can get it. And there just wasn't a lot of coverage nationally about the spring season and the FCS, and that was surprising to me. But it was good to see somebody putting good, valuable, actionable content out there on a consistent basis. So first, thank you for joining the show. And obviously, your coverage of the FCS this season.
Yeah, I mean, Rob and I talked about it. Rob Vino and I talked about it, and we basically said, look, we like betting on it. We like giving out information. It's a 20, 25-minute show, and it's ironic because you don't know how many people are watching until you don't put one out, because last week we had some technical difficulties, and people on Twitter were like, where's the show? Where's the show? It's the semifinals. So, yeah, all you have to do is put some effort into it. It's a sport you can't just jump into. Like, you can't just 4 weeks in be like, oh, I want to bet some FCS football. Like, you have to be there from the beginning, and certainly if you've watched our show with Rob, we were able to provide some information and alert people as to what they can bet on.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, that's such a great point, because I jumped into it in week 1 and 2 and got killed. And I think a lot of it, the information wasn't out there. So, Matt, when I listened to your show, you just kept developing and bringing that additional information to the viewers. And I thought it was just so good, because you're right, FCS, you can't just jump right in. You had a lot of different things, games getting canceled, teams only playing 2-3 games. We talked about it. It was a really hard betting angle unless you had that information.
Well, and somebody would say, like, hey, where's Trey Lance? Because Trey Lance played in that one game, and, of course, he's getting ready for the NFL draft, and so you kind of had to know that preseason, who's playing, who's not playing, who's getting ready for the draft. And of course, this I feel like is one of those sports where you should stick to your region, so that way you're not overwhelmed. Like, I'm in Virginia, so I'm in CAA country, so I stuck a lot to the CAA stuff. You guys up north with Delaware and Villanova and stuff like that. So I feel like if you are going to jump into a sport like this, stick to your region, especially if you're in the Dakotas, because there's so much good FCS football in the Dakotas.
Yeah, that's a great angle, Matt, because, I found myself sticking to the Missouri Valley Football Conference just for the mere fact that it was easiest to get data on that conference. That conference was so competitive. It was kind of the cream of the crop. So I felt like I got a better read on those teams. I was able to see those games a lot on ESPN Plus. I just felt more comfortable with those teams. A lot of those teams were competitive, and I just felt like I could get more information on them, because that was one of the biggest challenges. Like, I remember, prior to the season, just mining the Twitter accounts, mining different websites, just trying to get as much information as I could on these individual teams and what to expect week 1. And it kind of ties into what we're going to see on Sunday, because one of the early games that I bet on that it's funny looking back of it now was I took, UNI against South Dakota State. And the reason I did was because of the uncertainty at quarterback with South Dakota State, going into that game. And I said, this is a team that really has everything, the Jackrabbits, but they have some uncertainty at quarterback. And, I thought it was a tough spot for them early in the season. And, Gronowski has been one of the strongest quarterbacks in FCS. I feel like he's been such a surprise as a true freshman to them.
Yeah, oh yeah, count me in that group. I was on UNI that first week too for the same exact reasons. And Rob and I talked about it that first week, and I'm like, look, this is a really good team. They've got some good quarterbacks. The Gibbs kid, I thought he was going to be the starting quarterback. I'm like, Gronowski, I don't know very much about him. It's in the Unidome. So yeah, I was one of those guys who was also there. And I'll go back even further. That very first game, the FCS game way back in the fall, when they had that game that was a showcase, I had a side, but then the day of, COVID situation takes away a wide receiver, some defensive linemen, the long snapper. So that even threw some more in here, and that you can't find a ton of information, and then COVID creeps in, and maybe your best player's out, and you don't know that until after you make the bet. So that's what also made the FCS season so difficult, is because every once in a while there was that COVID situation that would change your bet drastically.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the hardest part too. Like, I remember during the season, speaking of South Dakota State, Pierre Strong got a little bit banged up, the running back. And it was so hard for me to figure out, find information, when it was going to go, whether he was going to go, whether he was not going to go, his availability. I was trying to mine the different websites, the Twitter accounts, and all that, and not getting that information until the day of. Sometimes, you want to get ahead of the market, but then it's hard to get that type of injury news during the week.
Plus, there were some teams that were treating this as like scrimmages. It's funny because, I produced our Richmond football coaches show, and we had a bunch of shows during the off season. And the approach was that this was going to be not necessarily a scrimmage, but they were going to get a lot of players some time, and they were going to allow, this to be a building block towards the fall. And then, of course, Richmond starts winning games, and the approach starts changing because you're like, oh, maybe we're going to make the playoffs now. So that was another thing you kind of had to read through the press clippings to see what the coach's approach was. Some people, like the JMUs and the North Dakota States, like, yeah, we want to win a championship. While other people are like, yeah, we're just going to use this to get ready for the fall. Case in point, New Mexico State, when they made their brief dalliance into the FCS, they were like, yeah, we're just going to play a bunch of kids. We don't really care. We've got a bunch of quarterbacks we're going to try. And of course, if you read that right, you were at least able the first game to take advantage of it because they got their butt kicked.
Yeah, Tarleton State was another team, and there were a couple teams like that with Tarleton State jumping from D2 into the FCS. Like, how would that translate? A successful, strong program in D2 coming over to the FCS. So Tarleton was a team that I played a lot early, but again, the volatility made it real tough. This season. And that was really the hardest part of handicapping. It was the team's different approach and, how the coaches were going to take it on a week by week basis, because we saw, and Southern Illinois was a team that was very vocal about it. We saw some teams just kind of give up mid-season almost, pack it in, whether they were getting too many injuries. They decided not to continue, or whether COVID became an issue. But we saw some teams kind of dip their feet in, play a couple games, and not finish out the season.
Yeah, the bad teams, you almost wanted them to stick around because you want to fade them, because you knew that there were going to be teams that were just like, yeah, we have no playoff future. We have no, the kids aren't really into it. We're getting sick left and right here. And so you almost wanted them to try and stick it out. But of course, you completely understood the teams that said, yeah, we're done. We don't want to play anymore. And so that's another thing when you had games getting canceled. I mean, I know that there were some Richmond and JMU games that were canceled pretty close to kickoff, or were canceled, days beforehand. So it was always, you were always on the move trying to, duck and dodge all these things that were happening.
Yeah, definitely. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, the season in general, I thought was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot just about the FCS in general and these kids. From a betting perspective, I thought one of the biggest challenges was kind of trying to anticipate the market movement. I felt like there were a lot of games early where I got closing line value that didn't play out in the results, over the weekend. And then some of the games where I didn't get closing line value and the market moved against me, they were some of the big winners for me. So that's going to kind of tie into the championship game, because it seems like the market is moving against me in this championship game. But is there anything else that you picked up kind of during the season that helped you kind of handicap things, besides kind of just trying to figure out the mentality of, where the teams are and the coach's approach?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for FCS, usually I didn't make my wagers until Friday or Saturday. I basically sat there and I said, all right, this is the number I'm looking for. If it gets there, I'm going to fire. If it doesn't, I'm not. And that's kind of the thing for FCS football, is the selectivity of things. This is why you focus on a couple of games. You focus on whatever you want the line to be, because if it doesn't get to where you want, or if it moves against you, $1 to $100 wager essentially on a book could move a line here. So to me, and if somebody's moving a line, they know something for the most part in the FCS. You're not going to have some casual guy put a bunch of money down and it's going to move things. So to me, it's always about being selective in this sport. And there were times that I kicked myself, I didn't jump in early. And then there were times I'm like, woof, I'm glad I didn't make the wager because it wouldn't have worked out. So to me, it's all about picking the number you want and then waiting for it and being willing to not accept it if it never gets there.
Yeah. Now, Dave, one of the things that we talk about, we can go back to early in the season. And I think one of the things that was so frustrating for us as bettors when we were doing the show, trying to handicap these games, was the turnover variance. I felt like, I can point to the first game. I remember that we were on Southern Illinois against North Dakota, and then they destroy them on the stat sheet, but turnover variance, they were -5 in turnovers, so they didn't end up getting the win. North Dakota got the win. I thought that was something that was very hard. That happened a couple times to me where we saw games where it was, 5 turnovers to 0, 6 turnovers to 1, early in the season, especially. And I don't know if that was a matter of the teams just being sloppy coming into the spring or what the situation was. But Dave, turnover variance was something we definitely struggled with.
Yeah, it hurt me. And I mean, I'd have games where I thought I handicapped it the right way, and you get a -5 turnover differential plus 200 on the stat sheet and yards gained, and you still lose the game. A lot of it to me, I thought, was the lack of practice time. And, each team had the lack of it, but the ones that were a little bit more risky and less conservative, because those conservative teams, like we'll talk about when we get to South Dakota State here, JMU was very similar too, that like to pound the ball. It was the ones that put it through the air that I just seemed to, really tend to be loose with the ball, not just with interceptions, but with fumbles at the quarterback position, because when you're dropping back, you get that extra volatility. So yeah, you're right. Turnovers were a big thing that I just, you can't predict. And on the other side, you can't handicap either.
Yeah, and the an important factor when you talk about that pre-practice, I noticed with so many of the teams, and listen, we look at the top teams in the FCS, right? A lot of them are located in the north. When you look at the Missouri Valley Football Conference, your Dakotas, the teams up there, and it was really tough. And even Albany, New Hampshire, because of the weather, because they're starting in the spring, a lot of them were dealing with a lot of snow. Early in the season, they're trying to go through camp. They're trying to get prepared for the year, in February, and they're just getting pounded with snow. So it was almost like the reverse. Like usually you think football snow at the end of the year impacting things. It actually impacted the team's preparation.
That's such a good point. It was such an odd year that I'm praying they do it again this way. And I know they won't, but I want to see another, because you'd have all this little information that you gathered like that.
Yeah, I love seeing football in the spring period. I was a big fan of the XFL, and hopefully that comes back in the spring. But it just helps carry me from the NFL to college football. But let's get into the game. I mean, let's get into the championship game. We'll start with what happened last week. Matt, I'm going to start with you. JMU obviously held the big lead, 24-3 at halftime, and it looked like that they were physically dominant in the first half. And then they let things slip away. What did you see from Sam Houston that you think they can kind of carry into this game against South Dakota State?
Well, it's Sam Houston can't do what they've done this playoffs. You look at the Monmouth game, it was way closer than it should have been. You look at the North Dakota State game. I mean, North Dakota State's offense was broken, and they score a bunch of touchdowns on special teams, and here they are, they have a chance to win late. You look at the JMU game. JMU scores 24 points in the second quarter. I mean, Sam Houston State can't have these lulls against South Dakota State. So you either look at it, they've got a massive horseshoe up their butt, or the luck's going to run out. And it depends on, I think a lot of people by betting on South Dakota State are saying the luck is going to run out because they're playing another tough opponent. Now, granted, look, North Dakota State and JMU are two of the toughest FCS opponents you can play. But to me, Sam Houston State can't do what they've done so far this playoffs. They have to hit the ground running. Schmid can't be throwing interceptions, and they can't have these turnovers early on, because South Dakota State, much like JMU, is just going to grind the clock, and it's going to grind the clock. And so a 24-point lead or a 21-point lead usually is a lot bigger against a team like James Madison. So to me, you've got to see a fast start from Sam Houston State, and Schmid's got to play like Schmid.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, turnovers with Schmid was something that we talked about. We talked about going into that game of how he had to limit the turnovers if they wanted to be successful. They have a very explosive offense. They can get chunk plays. They like to leverage his athletic ability on, key third downs and things of that nature. Dave, what did you see out of Sam Houston? We were texting back and forth. I thought the ticket was trash. I'm not going to lie to you. It came alive in the second half. I was shocked, but I think a lot of it had to do with special teams, and I think the home field advantage played key in that, and that's something that they're not going to have this weekend on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, what I saw was one person, one name, 2 words, Jaquez Ezzard. I think he turned that game around, especially with the 69-yard catch and run, and then obviously you're talking about the punt return. He put energy back into that team. And And then you're right, the home crowd, just all that stuff started snowballing and rolling downhill for them. But without that big catch and run play, I think we're looking at JMU in the championship. I think that's what turned it. Yes, Schmidt still has those turnover problems. What did he throw? 2 picks in the first half. You put a little pressure on him, which JMU has that awesome defensive line. He hurried the ball, and I just thought that I think he's going to have similar problems today. I don't know if you can, teach an old dog new tricks this quick. He's going against another great defensive line, and he's got to bring his A game. 1 turnover is too much today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Schmidt has been exceptional, top 5 in FCS in passing and top 4 in yards per completion. But the turnovers have been something that, he struggled with all year, I felt like, and it's interesting because I remember, a game against McNeese State, where they should have blown McNeese State out the stadium, and they let them hang around because of those turnovers. They're going to have to limit those for sure. Matt, when I looked at these 2 games last week, I thought that really the key to the games would be, whether Sam Houston and Delaware could match their opponents physically. And that's kind of because we didn't see any cross-conference play, because it was kind of like, hey, can, teams from the Southland or from these other conferences really match up physically with their opponents. We saw it with Sam Houston. They're able to kind of slow down, maybe not stop the JMU running game. They're able to slow down the Bison's running game the week prior. They didn't completely stop them, but they were good enough up front to kind of keep it in check. And we didn't see that with Delaware against South Dakota State. South Dakota State just completely steamrolled them. And I really think that was the difference. Now, when I look at Sam Houston going into this game, even a bigger challenge, right? You had North Dakota State, the Bisons, they had JMU, now they have South Dakota State. There's 2 ways that we could look at it. We could look at it as if, hey, they've passed the test twice against 2 of the most physical teams in the FCS, so they can hang with the big boys. Or do we look at it from the perspective of now they have to go do it again for a 3rd time? Is there going to be some fatigue for Sam Houston State?
I mean, I would have to think so, because South Dakota State essentially had a bye week last week. I mean, let's be honest. I learned nothing about the Jackrabbits last week other than they beat up on a really bad matchup. Delaware is a team that offensively isn't going to scare you a ton. And Henderson had no time in the pocket, was sacked 7 times. The one thing that will benefit Schmidt is that Henderson was able to at least be more mobile. And Schmidt and Henderson, should be able to get out of the pocket a little bit and try and create some things. But it didn't help. He still got sacked 7 times and the offense still didn't do anything. So to me, I look at South Dakota State last week essentially as having a quote unquote bye week. I mean, granted, it wasn't. They played, but they weren't stressed. It was essentially a 60-minute, just jog out there for them. So to me, you're right. Sam Houston State had another tough game last week after another tough game, and then they made the Monmouth game tougher than it had to be. So fatigue could be a factor here. Remember, we're in the season where these kids are not playing as much as they are right now, and so that is an edge to South Dakota State in that they won't be as tired for this game.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely something to look at. And I know that, like, hey, the game's in Frisco, that people think, oh, well, Sam Houston's in Texas, Frisco's in Texas. It's still a 3-hour drive. Like, it's not, I mean, they're not traveling as far as South Dakota State, but it's not like a home game. Matt, you talked a little bit about the weather. We are expecting some rain in this one. Who do you think that benefits? If we do get some weather, we do get some rain, both teams want to be physical. But obviously Sam Houston State does, I think, have a more explosive component to their offense. Do you think the rain will hinder the Bearcats in this matchup?
I'll say I think the rain benefits the under. I mean, I think that you're going to see both teams go and run the ball more. And obviously that plays right into Sam Houston State's strength defensively. And South Dakota State also really good defensively against the run. So to me, if you think that the rain is going to be a factor, the total, which is 47.5 in a lot of places, I think you got to play the under here because I think both teams are going to want to grind it out more. South Dakota State already does, but with a guy like Strong in their backfield. So to me, if it rains and there's a healthy wind, which it looks like right now, 15 to 16 miles an hour, now, I don't know if it's a crosswind. I don't know what kind of wind it is, but any sort of wind like that is going to be a factor. So to me, if you think the rain is going to be an issue, you should probably jump on the under now because it won't be 47.5 tomorrow.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to impact the kicking game as well, which sounds a little bit insignificant, but it really could make a difference in a game like this, especially when you're talking about, a South Dakota State defense, which I think is very bend, don't break, and Sam Houston State, who, against different competition, but they had one of the best defenses in the red zone this season. Dave, do you think that the kicking, how do you see this playing out? You think that this game could actually come down to the last minute of where there's a field goal, and the kicking game, could be relevant in this one?
Oh, yeah, I think it'll be relevant. And in any close game, the kicking game is a factor. Special teams is a factor. We saw it again last week. We've seen it in most Sam Houston State games. So absolutely, it's a factor. Do I think it's going to be decided by field goal? No. I think it's going to be, you're going to need a score late and probably a touchdown late or a stop. I think you're looking 4, 5, 6 point game. So I don't think it'll end on a kicker's leg, but I do think it'll be impacted early in the game. And you're right, not just win, like you mentioned, but, a little wet football, the snaps, even the punts and the kickoffs, being able to secure that and being able to, ensure you retain possession. Those are all going to be little factors that we need to focus on when looking at this game.
Yeah, definitely. And, this thing opened up at around 4, got up to 5 quickly. Now it's up to, we're seeing it move to 5.5, even 6 in some spots. The total, like I said, at 47. Sam Houston State's a team we saw in the first round of the playoffs, played to the under, very low scoring game. So, I think that definitely could be a play. You look at the money line, South Dakota State minus 200, 165 on the Sam Houston side. Matt, when you look at this game, South Dakota State, what do you think their keys are in order to win? Obviously, very physical team. They want to run the ball with Pierre Strong. But what if you're backing South Dakota State in this game? What are the things you want to look out for early?
By the way, on my live odds board, DraftKings just went to 6.5. So if we start getting 6.5s, maybe there becomes 7. This is where it comes into what we talked about earlier. If you have a number in mind, and Sam Houston plus 7 would be a very nice number, especially, I don't know if it's going to get there because it is such a key number, but there is a 6.5 on DraftKings. With regards to what you said, I think it's the interceptions, the turnovers. If Schmidt starts throwing interceptions and starts doing turnovers, South Dakota State's not the type of team that you should do that against. They allow 168.1 yards passing per game, and they've intercepted 12 passes with the safety. You don't often see a safety leading a team in interceptions, but that's what the Jackrabbits have, is that their safety leads the way. And it's just, look, if they can get this game to where they want, their offensive line is so good. They've allowed 10 sacks in 9 games so far. If they can get it to where it's close, even if they're behind by 1 score, even if they're behind by 3 or 4 points, South Dakota State's still going to be fine as long as they can keep it within that 1 score and not have to go to a throwing offense. I like Gronowski. He's certainly impressed me more from when all the way back in week 1 we're saying, who is this kid and why is he starting over Jabor Gibbs? I think as long as they can keep it within 1 score or push it to 2 scores and make Sam Houston State be frantic, that's where they're going to be more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. I think Gronowski's been a tremendous surprise. And like I said, I was on, you and I in that game early in the season, and I was like, listen, hey, I'm good here. I thought my bet was fine. Gronowski had to drive 80 yards, to score a touchdown for South Dakota State. I'm like, true freshman early in the season, this is never going to happen. And he answered the bell like he's been answering the bell all season. So I do think, a big key in this game is going to be, what quarterback can limit the turnovers. So far from this season, it's been Gronowski. But Dave, let's get to our predictions. This game, to me, I'm obviously on Sam Houston, and this one you can tell by the shirt. I have the future, so I'm already invested at plus 500. But I just think with the points, I think this game is going to be a very close game. I think that they have enough on offense to keep the game close. And I think that, when I looked at this game, we talked about South Dakota State and how they decimated Delaware, right? And they ran right through Delaware. And, but the week before that, I thought they struggled a little bit with Southern Illinois in the sense that Southern Illinois is a team that can score points and they can keep coming at you. And I think, the rain could be a factor, but I think if Sam Houston can put a little bit of scoreboard pressure on South Dakota State, I think that could kind of change the complexity of the game. I personally expect a tight game here. I'm on Sam Houston a lot on the points. I got a little bit on the money line, but I do have the points in this one. How do you see this game playing out, Dave, and what side are you taking?
So, I mean, it's such a cool game because you're looking at like one of the best offensive lines with South Dakota State, one of the best defensive lines with Sam Houston. I mean, Sam Houston, they generated 37 sacks on the season. They got a great defensive lineman up front with Jahari K. They create havoc. And I mean, going into the JMU game, we talked about it. I think they were letting up 68 yards per game on the ground. They're very good against the run as well. I mean, JMU had some success, but not their ultimate success that they've had on other teams. And that's a key. I mean, as much as we want to focus on Sam Houston's offense and being able to move the ball here and there, they are sloppy and they're not efficient. They're more explosive than anything else. And I think that battle in the trenches there is going to be very key. Can you limit the two-headed monster, Pierre Strong and Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State, the two running backs? They're averaging 231 yards a game on the ground, 6 yards per carry, both top 5 in the FCS. That's where this game is going to be won. Can Sam Houston limit it? And in a sloppy rain type game, I'm taking the points as well. And I got a little play in at 5.5. I'm going to pause and watch where it grows to. I think South Dakota State does win this game, but I like Sam Houston with the points. I think it's, look, there's some value. Matt said earlier, and I look at it this way. They got some luck up there, you know what? They've slayed their dragon in North Dakota State, and they had some revenge against JMU. They took their worst loss ever in playoff history against JMU just 8 years ago or 9 years ago, and they returned that favor. So slowly but steadily, I think they got a little magic going, but I think it just fades out at the end. But I'll take the points.
Definitely. Matt, how do you see this one playing out? You don't have to give a prediction if you don't want to, but is there a side or a total? You talked about the number getting this 7. Is there a breaking point in which you would have to take? You feel like the value would be on Sam Houston State to where you would have to take them?
I mean, it's probably 7. I mean, even if it's probably even less. I mean, I may jump in if there's more 6.5s that show up. But I do think that Sam Houston State, what they've done, has been able to give me some more confidence in them. I just wonder if the luck starts to run out. I wonder if the toll of playing 2 straight physical teams, and this is the 3rd straight physical team, if that just runs out. I think that it's a 24-20 game. I think South Dakota State wins this game. I think they actually score the late touchdown and get the victory and go ahead towards the end. I just think Sam Houston State's had a great season, and I think it runs out. My play is probably on the under, and since it's right now at 47.5, I would lean to the under here. And then if this thing keeps going up, I'll take Sam Houston State plus the points. But we'll wait and see because I think there's still more line movement to come. Also, you just want to make sure no COVID situations, no injury situations, nothing like that that's going to blindside you. But to me, right now, it's probably an under play, and if it gets to 7, I'll jump on Sam Houston State. But North Dakota State's your champion.
We see it similar.
Yeah, definitely. And what I think is why I think this season was so appealing to me is that I felt like during the season, and I kind of overdid it with this a little bit, during the season as far as betting. I might have overestimated this point, but I felt like some of the teams I thought we saw real early that the Bisons obviously had trouble at quarterback, right? And that offensively that they weren't really, they could run the ball against some of the weaker teams, but when they were going to play the elite teams, they would have to do more on offense. And then we saw them switch to Cam Miller. And I just thought that some of the teams that we typically see dominate in the FCS were getting a little too much credit. And this spring season was the perfect time for some of these other programs to kind of jump in here and make a name and really make a run at a title. So I think it's a lot of fun that we're seeing the same Houston State, South Dakota State teams in there. Nobody deserves it more. I think these two programs have always been competitive, but just have never had the opportunity to kind of take that leap and win a national championship. Matt, I kind of have a 2-part question for you. Like, what do you think a national championship means to these programs, and how much weight do you think it's going to carry into the fall? Whether it's, with recruiting or whether like how they're positioned in the betting market in the fall. Do you think that cachet kind of carries over into the fall, or do you think the market kind of perceives it as just like they won the national title, but it was just a spring?
Well, I mean, I think that it's definitely a legitimate championship because if you're able to get through and navigate everything that happened this season, then you definitely deserve a championship. But to me, I feel like it's going to be. I think early on you may see something where you might fade these teams early on because of the extra games and because of all the extra work they've had to put in. I'm sure Casey Keeler is going to change his practice schedule going into next season. I don't know if any of them are opening up with FBS teams or anything like that, but you may want to potentially necessarily fade them because we may see an inflation of Sam Houston State's line or of South Dakota State's line. So to me, it'll be interesting to see who they get that game one and what's their approach during practice, in late July and early August.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent point, because we saw that going into the spring. It seemed like, the market really respected the teams that played in the fall, and they thought that playing in the fall would carry over and help those teams into the spring. So we actually could see a reverse of that going into the fall, where the market perceives it as a negative just because of the fatigue factor and, playing this deep into the season. Very interesting, but it's going to be an awesome game, Matt. I'm super excited for the game. I'm hoping Sam Houston pulls it out and I can hit that future, but I think we're going to have a tremendous game anyway. So again, I want to appreciate you, for all your content during the season, and especially for hopping on with us today and giving us, tremendous insight. Why don't you tell our audience, where they can find your work, what you're up to, everything you got your hands into right now?
You can follow me on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. That's where I am, just doing some baseball stuff and NBA props right now. And then we'll just kind of start getting ready for the college football season. It's never too early to start looking at the FBS and, of course, the FCS for next season. And you can find my work on SportsMemo.com. But always here for you guys. And certainly, as you can tell, I'm a Philly guy. So, of course, anything you ever need, I'm here for you guys. Awesome.
We'll have to bring you back. We'll talk some baseball. Hopefully the Phillies, get it in the right direction and start contending in the NL East, and we'll have you on and we'll get some baseball plays. We'll talk some baseball before college football season.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks for joining us, Matt.
Awesome.
Oh, it's incredible. Matt does great work, man, and I'll tell you, it's like we jumped into the college football season in the FCS this year, and Dave, like I did. More research. I was up all night doing research, just mining, trying to find data on these games. And I would think that nobody knew more about the FCS than me. And then I would see Matt's show with Rob, and they would just be firing off just incredible data, actionable information. And I was just like, wow, man, like these guys got it down. I thought I don't know where they're getting this info, but they had everything. So Matt does a tremendous job with all college sports. And that's what we're rooted in. I mean, we started this in the fall. We ran Coastal Carolina. I feel like Sam Houston's my Coastal Carolina of the spring. But it was definitely awesome having Matt on and getting his insight.
Oh, it's great. I mean, listen, to be honest, there's not a lot of people that dove into FCS and nerded it out like we did early on. So to hear some others out there, driving those numbers, throwing that insight, I just really loved having someone else, I felt a little, welcomed.
Yeah, it was nice, man. And Matt's a great guy, Philly guy too. Philly guy at heart. He's down in the Richmond, Virginia area now, but 4 for 4. He
had JMU last week, didn't he?
Oh yeah. I mean, he's from he's in that area, so they're all JMU'd up, and it's a heartbreaker. I mean, it was like a tough way to lose, but it was. Hey, listen, man, I felt like I deserved it because I got smoked in the Delaware game. So
that's what I felt. I was running up and down my hallways last week when Sam Houston State was coming back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%, man. I was going nuts. I was almost driving off the road. Listen, we appreciate everybody checking in, man. Tom Kelly does a great job. Patterson at Fanatics. Check out his show on the Edge of Philly Sports Network. Chris Exushin. Yes, I am the go-to XFL insider. I can't wait to get it back. Check out, man, Chris. He does great golf work over at Fox Sports The Gambler. You can stream it on the iHeartRadio app. Also does a golf show, OTT Matchups. Check it out. He has tremendous guests lined up. Andre checking in. Adam as well. And, all the guys, Heat Ratio Sports Network. We appreciate all the support. But before we wrap things up, man, let's get into the NBA, Dave. The NBA.
I got no deadline. We can go. Let's roll whatever we need to do.
Yeah, definitely, dude. We'll do a good 20, 30 minutes here on the NBA because it's getting hot in the kitchen, man. And this is the craziest year in the NBA that I can remember. I thought the bubble was nuts, but this season seems to be absolutely bananas because we're gonna talk about it from a betting perspective. We have 2 teams that are going to probably win their conference. I think Utah, if they didn't wrap it up, I think they're right there because they won again last night. 2 teams that are going to win their conference that have been almost unbeatable at home. tremendous at home in both the Sixers and the Utah Jazz. And both teams have the third shortest odds to win the conference. And I think that is insane. Like, I want to start with that. Like, the fact that, like, the Sixers and the Jazz are not the favorites to win their conference with home court advantage, speaking to how successful they've been at home, is nuts. Is it me, Dave, or is that just insanity?
It's nuts, but it does really tell you what, the books are trying to do, and that's kind of create value for the teams that aren't named Brooklyn and the Los Angeles Lakers, right? They're getting so much play on those teams because those are public teams. Everybody out there in the world thinks Brooklyn's winning this East, no problem. And then as far as the Lakers go, they're going to have an uphill battle, but they still got LeBron and AD, so everybody's still riding high there. They can't not get money in on those teams. They keep pouring in. So the only way to really, redirect that money is to juice these other odds. And it's crazy. I mean, and the fact is Sixers, let's just think of them for a second. They get to avoid Milwaukee and Brooklyn. It's not that they're going to have a bye to the championship, the Eastern Conference Championship, but they don't have to play one of those teams. So they got probably 70, 80% chance just to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. And you want to give me, what is it, plus 300 to get to the finals? They're awesome odds. Really good odds. Crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, plus 330 right now on FanDuel, the Sixers to win the Eastern Conference. And if we go down the board, Milwaukee's at plus 320. So Milwaukee has the second best odds. And, Brooklyn Nets at even money. And, I think you touched on it. I just think that they're almost are they hedging against public perception just because everybody just thinks that, hey, Brooklyn and the Lakers are the most popular teams. So they have to be the odds-on favorite?
Yeah, I think it's that. And then the Clippers are right there behind them. And you know how much Clipper money came in last year. So the Clipper money is still rolling in this year. It's a lot of that. And, good on the books. I mean, they got to entice that money away however they can. Because no matter what, even though if you think the Nets and Lakers aren't going to win it all, how much money the books have invested into them, they got to move the money somewhere else because they can't take that big hit, right? That's what the books are trying to do. They don't mind if some 10% of the public wins here or there. They mind when it's a lot in one area. And that's why I think they have to put these odds back up just to get people to take them so they can balance out their books.
Yeah, it's crazy because there's a lot of people I respect too. And one of the things last night is I believe Houston beat the Clippers, right? They ended up holding on to win that game last night. Yeah. And a lot of people were saying that the Clippers are intentionally tanking because they want to be in the bracket so that they're seated away from the Lakers. And I think that is a crazy approach, but to think that the Clippers team couldn't come out and beat a Rockets team that is, worse than the NBA, just so they could avoid like the Lakers, like, is that really the message that you want to be sending to your team?
No, but that's the softest team. They did it last year. What were they? 3-1 on the Nuggets and lost. They had about 5 double-digit leads against the Nuggets and lost, 4 of them. That team is mentally soft, and if that's what they're aiming for, fade. I mean, it's just I'm not going to buy that that's what they were trying to do because I think they wanted LA. I think they wanted the Lakers all of last season. I can't buy it. Can you? Can you buy that they would actually? Because you don't know where the Lakers are ending up yet. You're not so sure. That's right. Still in flux. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, it's hard for me because, like, I'm a huge Kawhi fan. Like, and Kawhi is like I think the epitome of, the hardworking, like, listen, board man gets paid, like, tough, rugged, who cares? I'm not afraid of anybody. I'll win the title with Toronto. It doesn't matter to me. So it's hard for me to imagine him ducking the Lakers. But at the same point, it's the Rockets. How do you lose to the Rockets? I mean, they're 17-54. They won 17 games all year. How do you lose that game? So I don't know. I mean, I think I understand that there's a little bit of gamesmanship involved and you want to position your team best to kind of make a run. But, they lost 122-115 last night. Like, I just think that how do you lose that game?
I know. Well, speaking of, posturing yourself, look at the Eastern Conference and let's look close to home, right? Does a Miami Heat in the 4 or 5 game scare you? After watching what you saw the other night with the Sixers, scares me. And the reason it scares me is they throw that goofy zone at us, and I just it takes Embiid completely out of the game and makes us make threes, which not really our strong point. So I don't know. They're sitting in the 5 seed now. The Knicks can still get there, but that kind of scares me a little bit. And I'm sure Milwaukee is saying keep Miami out of 6 right now, right? Because they lost them.
Yeah.
Miami smoked them last year.
Yeah. They don't want nothing to do with that. But I also think, in my perspective, that I think Miami's a little overrated. Like, I think they still get a lot of credit this year for what happened in the bubble. And I wonder if what happened in the bubble was more of, catching lightning in a bottle, more than, actually like a precursor to what they can kind of do in the future.
Yeah, but they're 8-2 in their last 10. They've had their best 2 months of the season. Now they're starting to roll 15-7. Got a lot of healthier. Plus Oladipo done, which I actually think helps set the rotation a little better. Now they're not worrying about how to fit him in. I think they are dangerous. I mean, yes, they did catch lightning in a bottle in the bubble, but they're real. I think they're real. Now, are they real to win a championship? No, don't stop. No, that's not happening. But they're real to a team like the Sixers, the Bucks, or the Nets, where we thought it was just a top 3 dog 2 weeks ago. That team's real to give one of those teams, a very, very tough series.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the play-in, right? So we'll start with the Eastern Conference. Odds aren't out yet, obviously, because the actual matchups aren't determined yet. But we do know that the Celtics are going to be the 7. They're positioned there. And then the 8 and 9 is where it gets iffy. Both Charlotte and Indiana tied. And then Washington is a half game back at the 10 spot. But Washington is in with the win last night. So triple dub Westbrook will be on display in this play-in tournament. Obviously Boston's either going to get Charlotte or Indiana. Who do you think, has the best shot of kind of advancing out of these, out of those 2 teams?
Yeah, I think you're going to see Boston slide in. I mean, thing about Boston is, for what they do and what we've known them in the past, they've lost their last 4. They're a very poor defensive team. They have no depth. They have no center. Got it. But versus those teams, they have the experience. Charlotte's an up-and-coming team, obviously, with LaMelo and a couple of their young players like P.J. Washington. And I don't think they got a veteran in Rozier there now and Hayward. They just don't know it yet, and I think this will just be a good experience for them. But I think in the end, if Boston matches up either against the Hornets or the Pacers, they get the 7 seed. What's interesting is I do think the Wizards are very live to get in as the 8 seed. Russ has been there. We know that. Beal, you put those 2 up in any one playing game scenario. I think they're going to be a tough out. They've played a little better. They're 6-4 out of the bottom 4 teams. They have the best last 10 of any of them. They're 6-4, playing a little better ball. They've had stretches where they've won 6-7 in a row. They've beat some of the better teams in the league, by the way. So in a 1-game scenario, I like the Celtics. I like the Wizards as the 2 teams to get through in this playoff scenario.
Yeah, the Wizards are an awesome point I was going to bring up because this is a team that obviously has been, a bettor's dream the past couple of weeks. Like, they've been very good against the spread. And, my question is I can't wait to see, them get lined in this playoff tournament because the question becomes, as a sports bettor, is there going to be any value left by the time we get to this play-in tournament, right? Like, they've been so good against the number, that is all the value going to be extrapolated by the time that they play. But if they win these games outright, they're going to be dogs in these matchups. So I think that they're definitely a play on. I think the Wizards are a play on in here. And, we very well could see the Sixers taking on the Wizards in the first round. And I think another thing that kind of helps the Wizards in this play-on tournament is Russell Westbrook and his experience in the playoffs. You look at some of the other teams, Indiana, Charlotte, they don't have a ton of playoff experience. You touched on it with Boston, but obviously they're kind of a shell of themselves. I think that experience that Westbrook brings to that team, mixed in with the hunger of them being such a losing franchise, makes them, a very exciting team to watch in this tournament.
Oh, no doubt. You got it. And it was the perfect pairing, right? Russell Westbrook, where has he had the most success in his career? It's when he's been with Scott Brooks. So for them to be able to get him back with Scotty, it's really brought that game back out of Russell. Last year he got, he was okay in Houston. I mean, you can go back and look at the numbers, but it was just, it was water and oil, him and Harden. And now he's playing a little more free. They got rid of John Wall for Westbrook. And at the time, I'm like, that's trash for trash, right? Other than garbage for garbage. But in this case, it really has turned into a plus for the Wizards, and I give them a lot of credit. Listen, 33-38 is nothing to sneeze about. They're about to one more win. I think they go over the season win total. So I give them a lot of credit. And again, they don't beat the Sixers, but they sure give them an interesting matchup. Beal dropped 62 one game on us, something crazy. Like it would be a fun run and gun series, and I'd be looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the playoffs are better with Russ in them, right? You know what I mean? Regardless of whether it's a one and done, but I love the play-in tournament. I think it gives us a fun way to see more stars.
And let me tell you, I mean, LeBron spoke up, 2 weeks ago, said the guy who came up with this should be fired. Wasn't saying that last year, right?
Right.
It's no. This is. I don't want to call it genius because, just coming up with an idea in basketball is not genius, but it's a fantastic idea. The 7th and 8th seed are left out to just get, chewed up and spit out, right? But now you add this, maybe the 9 and 10 was playing a little better than the 7 and 8, and you're giving, to me, the best last two teams to get in. And I think it's really cool. I mean, I love it. I really do.
Yeah. I definitely think it's one thing that the NBA got right. But when we look at the perceived, we'll stick with the East. When we look at the perceived first-round matchups, obviously we talked about Sixers, Wizards could be a reality. Boston, Brooklyn, right? I don't think Boston's going to give Brooklyn any problems. And then we get into you're either looking at Milwaukee and Miami or the Knicks, and we said that, the dog there could be play on in that matchup. We know Milwaukee's kind of struggled in the playoffs, so it'll be interesting to see how that is lined. And then you have the 4-5, which is going to be Atlanta and either Miami or the Knicks. What do you think? Do you think Atlanta is just a sitting duck there, or do you think they're live and they have an opportunity with the home court advantage to do some damage in the first round?
No, Atlanta's live and has a real will have a real good chance. I think they've won the season series against Miami, but might have lost it against New York. So there's some tiebreakers still to be figured out as far as home court is get settled here over the next 2 days. But I do think, I'd give Atlanta a ton of credit. Obviously, they let go of Lloyd Pierce right around midseason there. They just weren't finding their stride. Nate McMillan's come in and give them that, veteran voice and really change things up a little bit. Now they have got healthier. Obviously, Bogdanovich came back. They're getting some more. Capella's playing great. They're dangerous. They really are because their style of play with Trae Young, you got the ultimate sniper there. But I think it's a bad matchup against Miami. I think they're live against New York. New York's a team, everybody's going to love them going in because they haven't made the playoffs since, we were babies. But don't listen, that's a Tom Thibodeau 80 to 80s style of game. I don't know how much that translates. They can't, you got to rely on the last possession. It's going to Julius Randle, and that's it. Everyone knows what's happening. You remember what the Sixers do, late in games under Brett Brown. We knew it was going to be double, steal, it's over. So I just don't know how much I trust the Knicks with that style when it gets to the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on there. So let's look at the Eastern Conference, futures. Brooklyn, we talked about them a little bit, even money. They're obviously going to be the popular public pick. A lot of people in Brooklyn. And then surprisingly, Milwaukee has better odds than the Sixers at 320, Sixers at 330, and these are on FanDuel. Miami Heat plus 1,200. And then you got Atlanta, the 4 seed, plus 3,000. Knicks plus 3,600. Then obviously you have Boston plus 4,600. These teams really aren't in play when we're talking about winning the Eastern Conference. Would you agree with me there? Like, where do you draw the line? Do we draw it after Philadelphia with those top 3 teams, or do we include Miami and Atlanta at plus 3,000? Do we think there's any value there whatsoever, or are they just passes?
The line is drawn after Philly. And as much as I've just given Miami a lot of credit, it's different this year, like you mentioned earlier with the bubble. Now you got it. Like Miami's going to have to go on the road and win 3 series on the road. It doesn't happen in the NBA. It's not like the NFL when the wild card team can sneak in and maybe win a couple road games. They're not winning 3 series on the road. There's a reason when they were the 5 seed last year and got to the finals. It was the first time we saw a seed below like 3 or 4 in decades. It's not happening this year. So I do draw the line at Philadelphia. Miami's dangerous, but I think Philly's a really good play with the plus 330. Like we already said, you're avoiding Milwaukee and Brooklyn. And then I really do like Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee matches up well against Brooklyn. They already showed it. I know there's been some injuries, but they beat Brooklyn twice the other week. The key is they can firepower with them. And Milwaukee, they're going to play games in the 130s against Brooklyn. They can shoot against them. They can play against them. It's going to be down the last possession. And it wouldn't be an Eastern Conference final. So I think the pressure might be a little less. So I like a little value in Milwaukee too. Milwaukee and the Sixers are the two. I would gang up against Brooklyn. Now, as much as the odds are there and everybody loves Brooklyn, if you give me 2 teams for plus 300 and I get 2 out of 3 shot to beat them, that's where I'm putting my money.
Yeah. So are you concerned to any, like, I think the biggest problem I have with Milwaukee and getting behind them outside of their reputation, right, in the past history of the coach not being able to get it done in the playoffs, teams just kind of walling off Giannis, from the inside, and then really not having, really an answer offensively when that happens to their path, which you touched on as well. We're looking at, Miami or the Knicks in the first round. Pretty tough matchup, and then having to travel to Brooklyn. So you think even with that tough first round matchup and having to go on the road to Brooklyn, you think that they can be victorious there?
I do. It's similar to your Sam Houston State theory too. Sometimes you got to, get rid of your past demons. But I look at teams from the past. I look at the Washington Capitals, Washington Nationals, known losers of many, many, many years, and known pretty much what we call chokers. They couldn't finally get by until they beat their nemesis. In the Capitals case, it was the Penguins. In the Nationals case, it was the Dodgers. And, they were finally able to get rid of those humps. There's only one way to get there. And that you got to go through the hardest path, I think, if you're Milwaukee. So when they're least counted on, when they're most counted out, sometimes you see teams rise to the occasion. That's why I think there's good value in Milwaukee this year.
It's a very interesting point. No pressure, right? Not supposed to win. Hey, no one's expecting them. Then they can kind of jump up and steal some money. Very great points. Let's move over to the West. We talked a little bit about the West. Lakers favorites plus 240, Clippers plus 260, Utah plus 270. And then you get into a very interesting Phoenix Suns team, man. Plus 750 on the Suns. The Suns are a team second best record in the West, winning 70% of their games this year. Looks like they're kind of locked into that 2 seed. Been very tough at home, 27-9, right? And they're going to have possibly home court all the way unless they face Utah in the finals. Plus 750 is a pretty big number for them. Do you think there's value there, and why do you think it's lined this way?
Yeah, there's absolute value. And there's value because of the one guy, Chris Paul. A potential MVP candidate. I know he's not going to get there if Jokic is to win and Embiid's for second, but he's going to be right in the talk, might steal a couple first-place votes. When you have a guy with that type of veteran leadership and can, teach these young guys what the playoffs are all about and maybe even be able to, pull them aside when things are getting adverse or going the wrong way. That's something huge that you can't coach, you can't have. It's a intangible. So I think Phoenix is real live here. I love the way they play basketball. They're about 8, 9, 10 deep even on certain nights. They shoot the 3 ball really, really well. So yes, I do. Now their challenge obviously is going to be, they could end up with the Lakers. They could end up even with the Portland, who's playing, again, good ball at the end of the season, Golden State. So the ability for them to have to roll through that, then have to roll through the Clippers. You can see why and then maybe Utah, you can see why they're path to win all 3 of those plus 750. I think it's the right number. There's value. I'm just a little worried. I don't know if they can beat all 3.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. You brought up Jokic, the Joker MVP, the Nuggets plus 1,300. do we draw the line at Phoenix at 750, or do you think there's any value with the Nuggets in this playoffs in a stacked Western Conference? It seems like to me I would draw the line at Phoenix, but what's your take on Denver?
You're 100% right. Denver, they're done with Jamal Murray. He was a hero last year in the playoffs. When he went down, it really just, it tipped the scales. And it's unfortunate because Denver had that magical run last year, and you could see, flashes. Like, for me, Jamal Murray's a very interesting player. Like, I expected so much out of him this year, 25 points plus a game. And he just seems to only want to turn it on when he needs to turn it on. But that's playoff time when the lights are on you and the cameras are on you. Without him, they got to rely a lot more on Michael Porter Jr. and some other, key aspects. They got the trade deadline like Aaron Gordon, but I just don't think they have the firepower, man. I think they're out in the first round. So, yes, I draw the line at Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. I'm surprised that Denver is playing so well without Murray, to be honest with you. I was very, down on Denver when that injury came through, and I was kind of making a joke because obviously, Philadelphia were from Embiid, and he doesn't really get the credit that Jokic's getting with what he's doing in Denver. So I was kind of laughing in the sense of like, oh, I'm sure Denver will be fine with the MVP, not having Murray, and they've actually played exceptionally well, and he has carried them here towards the end of the season. But I do agree. I think it ends in the postseason, which leads me to my next question for you, Dave. I'm going to fire this one off at you. We talked about the Clippers. We talked about the Nuggets. You mentioned Portland playing very good ball lately, 8-2 in their last 10. Dallas 8-2 in their last 10 as well. These two teams kind of hitting their stride, right? So which of those two teams, Dallas and Portland, if any, do you think is live in the first round matchup against the Clippers team, which can be kind of flaky at times, right? Or this Denver Nuggets team? Which team would you back out of Dallas and Portland in that first round matchup? You think there could be value?
Honestly, both.
Yeah.
So if you remember, Dallas played the Clippers last year, and even Dallas played the Clippers earlier this season. I think Dallas might have beat them by like a record of like 50 points. It was something insane. And Luka made some huge shots against the Clippers last year. He's in their head a little bit. He just didn't have the support last year. Now Kristaps is back and playing. He's got a couple other key weapons. I know, again, another team that tends to, rely on the three ball a little bit, so they can be very volatile but very good at times. I just don't trust the Clippers, and you're giving me I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think there's value in Dallas, and there's definite value in Portland, especially if they end up playing a team like Denver, where I just think that Dame time is the right time. Last year, he was scary too, going against the Lakers. They got one, but then they ended up steaming out. But this is a team that's playing for their coach's job too, by the way. A lot of reports out there that they're finally going to move on from Terry Stotts, who's been there about, one of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA, brought his team to the playoffs, I think, 8-9 straight years. But enough is what I'm hearing. One playoff round win can go a long way. Playing for your coach can do a lot of things. So I like both because you're going to get plus 200 plus value, I think, in both matchups.
Yeah, I love me some dog money, man. So that's like music to my ears. The West is going to be wild, man. With like the Lakers being in the play-in, it's going to be insane. Let's talk about that play-in tournament. Right now, the way it stands, again, the 8 and 9 seeds are kind of up in the air with Golden State and Memphis. Both those teams tied now with one game to go. But it looks like the Spurs are going to be the 10. Obviously, we expect the Lakers. I assume to win. I don't think there's upset potential with those other teams. But, who do you think can get into that A seed out of Golden State, Memphis, and San Antonio? I kind of lean towards Golden State. Do you think Memphis can give them a run?
Oh, Memphis definitely can. I mean, that's a great story down there. A team, again, that I really think is shorthanded when it comes to talent. You have Ja Morant, obviously, and then Jonas Valanciunas is playing great down low. But, name me a couple other players outside of them. They're starting to get some out of their rookies. Desmond Bane's giving them something off the bench, but they got that other with the guy that always gets teed up and starts talking trash. Coming. But anyway, they're just they're a team of a lot of picks 15, 16, 17. Like they just have a weird mix. But man, 38-33 in the West, amazing. But I agree with you. Golden State, there's just something to be said about the way they've come back from the dead. Steph Curry is he's from another planet, the way he's playing. Getting a lot out of Wiggins. Oubre had a great play last night to save the game. Draymond's still there to coach the defense and be the spiritual animal that they need. Hey, I like Golden State as well. I think it's Lakers Golden State coming out of this.
Yeah, I do too. I think you're dead on right there. So when we look at the Western Conference odds, we drew the line at the Suns. Lakers plus 40, Clippers 260, Utah plus 270, Suns plus 750. What is the best play on the board out of those four teams?
For me, it's Utah. I mean, you're getting one of the hardest places to play. Obviously, you documented earlier, 31-5 at home. And now they're going to have home court advantage. You tell me I mean, they can steal some road games too. They have the ultimate, weapon in Donovan Mitchell. He's everything or nothing, but I mean, it's still one of those guys you want in the playoffs. Very solid defense, great 3-point shooting team. Quinn Snyder has really done amazing things with how they spread the ball. You could look up and be up 10 and then be down 10 and 3 minutes later against that team. They're that dynamic and explosive. They're that efficient, highest point differential NBA. Why not? I mean, you're getting some great odds. I like Utah as the best value in that bunch. How about you?
Yeah, I love Utah. I mean, so when you said that, that's music to my ears. I just think it's criminal. Like when you look at it and you strip the noise away, you got a Utah team that is 31-5 at home, and they're getting home court advantage in a year where they're going to avoid the Lakers. You know what I mean? Until the final, like the Lakers are going to come in at 6 or 7, so they're going to avoid them. They're going to get, probably, Denver or the Clippers or Dallas or Portland in the second round, depending on, how that all plays out. Very easy path for them to get to the Western Conference Finals. And then the team that they're going to play, like even if it's the Lakers, it's going to be the Lakers' third series on the road. All these teams are just going to have real tough paths to them. And I think that they're a team that is due. Like, last year I thought they could have made some noise in the bubble. Jamal Murray just went absolutely unconscious. He was bananas in that series. They were up 3-1 and he just went off. So like, I think that that's kind of like an outlier. Like I think they would have done a lot of damage last year if they were to get through. But I think with the home court advantage, 31-5, and then the path that I think everything falls in place for this Utah team. And listen, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm Ben Simmons. I'm not Donovan Mitchell, right? I don't, you know what I mean? But the guy can play, man, and I think he's going to be healed up, and I think he's going to be healthy, and he's going to be ready to go and ready to make a statement. So if I were to handicap it now, man, if you want me to give you, the NBA Finals, I'm going to tell you it's going to be Utah and the Sixers. It's going to be Ben Simmons against Donovan Mitchell.
Man, I like that. Yeah, I'm going to go Utah as well.
Attaboy.
Yeah, all right. Give me the Sixers right now. I'm with you. So I just think there's a lot to be said about. I want to see how this finishes. I'm telling you, I'm scared of Miami. I'm not scared that I want an easier path so that they're well rested for that Brooklyn-Milwaukee winner. That's the scary point of the Miami. If I got to go battle 6-7 games with that physicality, that kind of neutralizes what I think they have a big advantage of. But the home court advantage is huge. I know they're both number ones, but yeah, I'm with you. Give me Utah.
Yeah, I think so. So. So that gets us to the finals, right? So let's talk real quick before we wrap things up about the odds, for the NBA championship. Brooklyn plus 210, Lakers plus 500, Clippers plus 600, Utah plus 600, and then Milwaukee 700, and the Sixers plus 950. The Suns.
Where are you getting that from? Because I got
FanDuel.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on FanDuel. Yeah, I'm on FanDuel. DraftKings didn't have the conference stuff when I was on there this morning, so I'm holding it from FanDuel right now. But obviously shop around, get the best numbers. But the Suns plus 2,400, I think, is a huge number for, like I said, a team being that successful. But if we narrow it down to the Sixers and the Jazz, Sixers 950, Jazz plus 600. If it gets to that finals matchup, do we think the Sixers could pull it out? Do we think there's value with the plus 950?
Yeah, so looking at it on DraftKings, you got Utah 700, so a little more than your FanDuel.
Nice.
Philly down to 750. So shop around. I would buy Utah on DraftKings and Philly on FanDuel, but I got to be honest, as much as I love the Philadelphia 76ers with all my heart, That's a bad matchup for them.
All that scoring,
and it will take Embiid a lot to be able to, and he'll dominate the Gobert matchup. Don't get me wrong, but he's going to have to be used a lot and relied on a lot. And you got to match threes with that team. That's not something the Sixers really have. I think the Sixers are one or two, bench snipers away from really being that absolute dominant force. I would take Utah with them, to win the NBA championship if those two matched up.
Yeah, I think so as well. What is your confidence level before we get out of here in the Lakers? Because I think the Lakers are fascinating because I still think even online, there's a lot of talk about what the Clippers were doing and people were like, wow, they really scared of the Lakers. And a lot of people I really respect were like, yeah, why wouldn't they be? It's the Lakers. Do you think the Lakers team is as strong as they were last year? Because they're not. I don't think they're as strong underneath. Physically, they lost some big bodies. I'm not convinced that they're the same team. What are your thoughts on the Lakers, real quick, before we get out of here?
It's interesting you say underneath because they got Gasol and Drummond, but they just can't figure out who they're going to use. Gasol's pissed off because Drummond came in and took his minutes, and then Drummond can't make a shot. It's hitting 20%. It's a weird mix that they got going on down there. They obviously haven't played together a lot with all these different injuries. I think the Lakers are real live. I think they're actually deeper and better when all healthy than last year. But you can't bank on health. And from that standpoint, I can't put my money on a team that I just, one LeBron, steamrolling charge away from him missing some time. And AD, he can roll his ankle tomorrow. I just can't put my money there. I think they're dangerous. And I think they will be, a force to be reckoned with. I just can't trust their health. So I'm off. But in the end, I would not count out the Lakers.
Yeah, one of the most fascinating things I think about this playoffs with the Lakers coming in and being such a low seed is we've seen typically year after year how much home court advantage helps because it's how much you get the calls, right? And growing up as a kid, I remember watching, the Pistons and the Blazers with Isaiah Thomas and Clyde Drexel, and it would you could know, you would look at the newspaper and you would see, oh, okay, first 2 games home team wins, second 2 game home team wins, boom, 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 the home teams will win every game. It felt like, and that's because they get the calls at home. You know what I mean? But now we're going to see a team like the Lakers that gets so much respect on the road. It's going to be interesting to see if they get those calls. And I think that's very important, when we talk about the landscape of the playoffs and home court advantage, because, in the Sixers respect, the Sixers are a team, I think they lead the NBA in free throw attempts per offensive possession. So the calls are important, and getting that home court advantage is important because you get the calls when you're at home. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Lakers get the calls, even if they're on the road. That's going to be something to me because we know the NBA, hasn't always been a fair game, right? We can admit to that. We've had some officials come out and have some trouble. So the officials can have a huge impact in these games. And that's going to be something as a sports bettor I'm going to have my eye on.
Yeah, and with the Lakers, I don't hold me to this, but I think LeBron James hasn't lost a first-round series in his career, or he maybe won, and it was way back in his rookie year. So now you're looking at his first time that he's probably on the road in the first round. In the last 15, 20 years. So it is
against a real good team.
Yeah. I can't wait to see. That's the hard part about these Suns, the Lakers. They're going to have to roll 3 really good teams. That's why when you're looking at this and betting, I really stress, look at the path each team has to take. That's very important when trying. The Lakers last year didn't play one team over a 4 seed. They got lucky. They got a very easy path. They didn't get the Milwaukee. They didn't get the Clippers. They didn't get the Boston.
And it's because it's also there's fatigue that goes into it. If you're playing 7 games, 6 games, 7 games, there's fatigue by the time you get to the finals. So that's why I'm excited to see the Sixers get the number 1 seed. That's why I like Utah the most coming out of the West. I think that they are the best play. Our guy Al Griffin checking in, man. He's going to carry you all the way through the Sixers playoffs with a half-court Heat. Does a tremendous job here at the Heat Ratio Sports Network. But Dave, that's going to do it for me, man. I got to get out of here. Do you have any plays for the audience? You want to do our 3 plays real quick before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I'll roll off 3 real quick. Listen, Drums, I got to say, 5 out of the last 6 weeks been a 3-game sweep for me. So
perfect. The people need this then.
But I'll say bet cautiously because you never know. Those streaks are meant to be broken. But hey, Going to look at golf today. Hasn't teed off yet. One matchup real fast. Vincent Whaley, -109 over Ben Martin. Really like his strokes gained tee to green numbers this week, and that's why I'm taking that matchup. This is an auto bet, but I know it's scared. That's why it might scare me a little bit. White Sox versus left-handed pitching, and they get a lefty tonight in Mike Minor. -180 tonight against the Royals. You've seen the Royals. They lost like 11 in a row before finally breaking the streak last night. But White Sox are an auto play against lefty. -180 seems almost too good to be true. And then last, I'm going to take the under 9.5 runs in the Boston Angels game today at 4 o'clock. LA is 29th in batting average against left-handed pitching. And Dylan Bundy, he's been getting rocked lately for the Angels, but his expected ERA is much lower than his real ERA. High batting average of Boston play. I like the under 9.5.
Nice. Some positive regression there with Bundy. Love to see it, man. Hopefully we get another sweep. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give you 3 plays in the UFC for the people. We got some fights tonight. It's going to be a tremendous card. UFC 262. And I'm going to go with I'm going to start with a woman's fight, and I'm going to go with Araujo over Chikagian +120. We're going to take the dog money here. I think Araujo is the more powerful, violent striker. I think Chikagian, a little flaky, can kind of underperform in big spots in the past. Araujo 4-1 in the UFC. Only loss was when the opponent came in overweight. And then I'm going to bet against Tony Ferguson. I think that age is a real thing. 37 years old. I think this is the end of the road for him. I think he's washed. I'm going to take Dariush minus the 185. I got it at. Listen, your career doesn't ask for permission when it comes and takes it away. And when you hit the end of the road, you hit the end of the road. And I think that's it for Tony. So I like Dariush tonight, -185. And then I'm going to take the dog in the main event. I'm going to go with Michael Chandler against Charles Oliveira. I just think Chandler has a unique combination of having good wrestling and being able to put you to sleep. I think you don't see that too much. And I think Oliveira is a guy who's very well versed. But I don't think he's really fought the level of competition that Chandler has. He ran through a Ferguson, who again I think is washed. But so I like Chandler tonight. I think I'm getting him at the right price. I think this is a coin flip at best. So I got Chandler +115. I like Michael Chandler tonight to win the lightweight title in the UFC. So 3 UFC plays. Let's hope they're 3-0. Let's hope we're all winners. Hope we all cash this weekend.
I love it. I love the Chandler play. I really do. That boy is bad, and I think he's ready, man. Those guys that come up, it's almost like when Connor was coming up, and you could just see this momentum fester.
Yep.
I like Chandler.
Yeah, and I think his experience plays well. Like he's fought a ton of Bellator, he's fought a ton of different type of fighters. So I think that even as slick as Oliveira is on the ground and diverse with his stand up, I think that he's going to be prepared. He's going to have a game plan. So I like him. I think the price is right with Mike Chandler tonight. Yeah. So. Good luck to everybody. Listen, we got to get out of here. Make sure you check us out Wednesday night for our golf betting show. We will be back Wednesday night. PGA Championship. It's going to be a tremendous, tremendous show. So make sure you tune in, get all your golf plays. And of course, we will be back on Saturday doing it again, betting for breakfast. Hopefully, coming off a lot of big wins. I'm pulling for Sam Houston and these points, so I can't wait. But thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, Heat Ratio Sports Network on YouTube. That's the best way to support us. So good luck for everybody. Let's hope we get some winning plays.